The afternoon sun beat down on the town square with the kind of heat that made everything shimmer and distort. Margaret Hayes stood on the auction platform, chin raised despite the shame burning through her chest. She wore men's work pants, sturdy canvas that had sparked this whole ugly spectacle. Her uncle circled the platform like a preacher condemning sin. Da mai kudai. 7 years indentured labor. He shouted to the gathered crowd. Aidan. To pay the debts she owes this family for her shameful behavior. Margaret's hands stayed steady at her sides. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her tremble, wearing men's clothing like some harlot. Her uncle continued. Refusing honest marriage proposals, working horses like she's got no sense of propriety. A woman in the crowd whispered loudly enough for Margaret to hear. Always knew she'd come to no good. The auctioneer stepped forward, gavel in hand. His voice carried the practiced rhythm of a man who'd sold everything from cattle to cookware. Idea ritsi, indentured. 7 years' labor to any man willing to take on the burden of taming her wild ways. We'll start the bidding at Robert Harrison had only come to town for supplies. His son walked beside him, 8 years old and full of questions about everything. They'd been heading toward the general store when the crowd caught his attention. Papa, why are they selling her? Robert stopped. His hand tightened on his son's shoulder as he took in the scene, a woman on an auction block. A farce of justice wrapped in righteous judgment. He'd seen this before. His own mother had faced town's censure for being too outspoken, too strong-willed for frontier propriety. His late wife had loved that he defended his mother then. Stood against gossip and cruel whispers. The woman on the platform met his gaze. Her eyes held defiance and dignity in equal measure. Not a broken woman, not wayward or wild, just competent and practical, in a world that punished women for both. Papa, his son asked again. Robert saw the quality of her stance, the calluses on her hands, the way she held herself, like someone who knew horses and hard work. The crowd saw scandal. He saw someone being destroyed for refusing to apologize for her capabilities. His jaw tightened. His hand moved toward his wallet. The auctioneer called for bids. Do I hear? I'll pay her debt. Robert's voice cut through the square like a blade through cloth. The crowd turned. Whispers rippled outward. Margaret's uncle smiled with greedy satisfaction. The woman on the platform searched Robert's face for the trap she knew was coming. There was always a trap. Robert walked through the parting crowd, his son following close. He counted out bills with deliberate precision, laying each one in the auctioneer's palm, exact amount. Not a penny more than the fabricated debt her uncle claimed. The auctioneer handed him the indenture contract. 7 years of labor. Terms and conditions spelled out in cramped legal script. Margaret watched him read it, her breath shallow in her chest. This was where the trap closed, where the new master revealed himself no better than the old bondage. Robert looked at her, then at the contract, then, without a word, he tore it in half. The sound of ripping paper cut through the murmuring crowd. He tore it again. Quarters now. Then smaller pieces. Methodical and unhurried, he let them fall between his fingers like snow, drifting down to the dusty platform. You're free, he said simply. Margaret's throat tightened. She didn't trust the words. Couldn't trust them. But if you need work, Robert continued, I need someone who knows horses. My breeding program needs proper management. Real wage. Your own cabin. No obligations beyond the job itself. His son watched with wide eyes, witnessing something he'd remember the rest of his life. I don't take charity, Margaret said, voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. Good. I don't give it. Robert met her gaze square. I need someone who can handle difficult bloodlines, organize breeding records, and manage a stable crew. If you can't do the work, I'll find someone else. But I suspect you can. Margaret studied his face. No pity there. No savior complex or hidden expectations. Just a man offering honest employment to someone whose competence he recognized. I'll prove myself worth the wage. She said, I'm sure you will. The crowd buzzed with scandalized speculation. Her uncle sputtered protests about family honor and proper channels. Robert ignored them all. He gestured toward where his wagon waited at the edge of the square. We should go before anyone else decides they have opinions about my business. Margaret stepped down from the platform. Her legs shook, but she kept her spine straight. Robert's son smiled at her without judgment. Just curiosity and the natural friendliness of children not yet taught to hate. They walked through the crowd together. Behind them, Margaret's uncle shouted about impropriety and shame. Robert didn't look back. As they reached the wagon, Margaret allowed herself one glance at the town that had tried to sell her. Let them talk. Let them judge. She was leaving on her own terms this time, not in chains of debt or shame. Robert helped his son into the wagon, then offered Margaret a hand up. She took it. His grip was firm and brief. Assistance without presumption. The torn contract pieces still lay scattered on the platform, already stirring in the afternoon wind. The road to Harrison Ranch wound through autumn landscape, going golden brown. Margaret sat in the wagon bed, giving father and son the bench. She watched the countryside pass, still half expecting this to dissolve into another cruel joke. Robert's son turned around to face her. I'm Thomas, he said. What's your name, your real name, not what that man was calling you? Margaret. Margaret Hayes. Why were they so mad about your pants? Thomas, Robert said quietly. That's not polite. It's all right. Margaret met the boy's curious gaze. They think women should wear skirts. Always. Even when skirts get tangled in stirrups or catch on fence posts. Even when you're mucking stalls or breaking horses. Thomas considered this seriously. That seems stupid. Thomas. But it is. Papa, you said we should dress right for the work we're doing. You don't wear your Sunday suit to fix fences. Robert's mouth twitched toward a smile. You're not wrong. My father taught me horses, Margaret said, surprising herself with the offer of history. He died when I was 16. My uncle inherited everything and decided I needed taming more than training. My mama died too, Thomas said with the matter-of-fact sadness of a child who'd learned grief young. Made 2 years ago. The silence that followed held weight but not discomfort. Shared loss created its own understanding. Why did you help her? Papa. Thomas asked. Robert was quiet for a moment. Hands steady on the reins. My mother was like Margaret. Strong and capable. The town didn't like that. They said cruel things. Tried to make her small. He glanced back at Margaret briefly. My father stood with her. Taught me that character matters more than what people think of you. Mama loved that about you. Thomas said, she did. They crested a hill and the Harrison Ranch spread before them. Well-maintained buildings, sturdy fences, and the unmistakable layout of a serious breeding operation. Margaret's practiced eye cataloged it, all the separate paddocks for different age groups, the covered arena. The barn sized for quality, not just quantity. This wasn't charity. This was real work, needing real skill. The wagon rolled through the gate. Thomas jumped down and ran ahead, eager to show Margaret the stables. Robert helped her down, then paused. I meant what I said. No obligations beyond the work. You stay as long as it suits you. You leave when you choose. Margaret looked at the ranch, at the horses already moving toward the fence to investigate newcomers, at Thomas calling for her to come see the new foals. I can work with this, she said. Robert nodded. I was counting on it. She walked toward the stables, Thomas chattering beside her about each horse's name and personality. Behind them, Robert closed the gate. Not locked, just shut against the world they'd left behind. Margaret stepped into the barn and breathed in hay and horse and the possibility of belonging. Her fingers traced the edge of a stall door, calloused palms recognizing quality craftsmanship. Maybe, just maybe, this could be home. 3 weeks passed in the rhythm of honest work. Why much I see? Margaret rose before dawn, moved through her days in the comfortable ache of labor well done, and fell asleep in her small cabin with the satisfaction of purpose reclaimed. She transformed the breeding program with quiet efficiency. The previous manager had been adequate but uninspired, keeping records in scattered notebooks without system or foresight. Yet, Margaret reorganized everything into clear charts, tracking bloodlines, breeding dates, and outcomes across 3 generations. Robert watched from a distance, saying little but missing nothing. She proved her worth daily, and he stopped checking her work after the first week. The difficult stallion came to her on the second Tuesday. The hands had been fighting him for days, trying force where patience was needed. Margaret stepped into his paddock alone, speaking low words in a steady cadence. She moved without aggression, letting him circle and challenge until curiosity overcame fear. Thomas watched from the fence rail, absolutely still. The stallion approached Margaret warily, nostrils flaring. She let him sniff her hand, her shoulder, her hair. When he finally settled, she ran her palm along his neck with the confident touch of someone who'd been born speaking horse. Shy got bay. How'd you do that? Thomas asked afterward. Respect. Margaret said, you can't force a horse to trust you. You have to show him you're worth trusting. The boy absorbed this like gospel. He shadowed her constantly, learning more in those weeks than a year of formal schooling could have taught. Not just about horses, but about integrity and competence divorced from social performance. One afternoon, while they cleaned tack together, Thomas asked the question she'd been waiting for. Why do you wear pants, really? Margaret didn't look up from the bridle she was oiling. When you're training horses, you need to move freely. Skirts catch on things. They tangle in stirrups. If a horse spooks and you fall, fabric can drag you. She met his eyes then. This isn't about being mannish. It's about doing the job right and staying safe. We're townspeople beside. Thomas nodded, understanding immediately what adults refused to see. Robert joined them as the sun lowered, leaning against the fence with coffee cooling in his hands. He'd heard the exchange, saw his son processing wisdom Margaret offered without preaching. In town, the gossip had started, quiet at first. Just whispers at the general store and meaningful glances at church. Nothing direct, not yet, but Robert heard the whispers following him like shadows. That evening, the 3 of them shared supper at the main house. Simple meal, simple conversation. Thomas talked about the foal born that morning, his excitement infectious. Margaret smiled more easily now, the defensive walls lowering degree by degree. Robert caught himself watching her laugh at his son's enthusiasm, the way lamplight caught in her hair, the grace of her capable hands. He looked away quickly, reminding himself it was too soon, too complicated. But the seed was planted, growing slow but certain. The first frost came early that year. Margaret wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. Standing on the porch of her cabin and watching dawn paint the horizon, the work was good. The pay was honest. Thomas was a joy to teach. She could stay here forever. The thought terrified her. "You're up early." Robert's voice came from behind her. He climbed the porch steps with his own coffee, hesitating before settling against the rail. "I mind company." "It's your ranch. It's your porch. For as long as you're here." They stood in companionable silence, watching the ranch wake around them. This had become habit lately, these quiet morning moments before the day's demands pressed in. "I worry I'm failing him," Robert said suddenly. The words came rough, unpracticed. "Thomas, raising him alone, not giving him enough, not teaching him right." Margaret looked at him, surprised by the vulnerability. "No. You're teaching him to value people for what matters. Character over appearance. That's everything." "Am I?" Robert stared into his coffee. "Or am I just making him different in ways that'll hurt him later? The town already thinks I've lost my sense." The town thought I needed taming. He smiled despite himself. "Fair point." The silence shifted, deepened into something more intimate than comfortable. "I'm afraid of hoping," Margaret said quietly. "For permanence, for belonging. I've learned hope is dangerous when you're someone like me." Someone competent and honest. Someone who doesn't fit what people expect. Robert turned to face her fully. "You fit here. That's what matters. Other than E." Their eyes held for a breath too long. Margaret looked away first, heart hammering against her ribs. This was dangerous territory. Caring meant risking everything she'd just found. Later that morning, riding into town for supplies, Robert felt the weight of stairs before he heard the words. Mrs. Henderson turned her back deliberately at the mercantile. The banker's greeting was coldly polite. At the feed store, conversation stopped when he entered. Coming home, Thomas asked the question Robert had been dreading. "Ops Bay." "Papa, why don't people like Miss Margaret?" Robert chose his words carefully. Sometimes people judge others for being different. "You're wand raw. They don't like when someone challenges what they think is proper, but she's good at her job. She's nice to me. She works harder than anyone." "I know." "Son." "Then why?" "Because people are scared of what they don't understand. And instead of trying to understand, they judge." Thomas processed this. Face serious beyond his years. "That's not right." "No, it's not." In that night, in their separate cabins, both Robert and Margaret lay awake. Her thinking, "I could stay here forever." Him thinking, "What if she leaves neither?" Ready to speak. The hope growing between them like spring grass. Under snow. The frost deepened. The warmth inside their small circle held firm, but outside their sanctuary, the cold was gathering force. The note arrived on a Monday, tucked into the fence post by the main gate. No signature, just words scratched in angry script. "Your boy will be corrupted by that unwomanly influence. Naomulurusheus gaze. Send her away before it's too late." Robert read it twice, jaw tightening with each word. He crumpled the paper in his fist. But the damage was done. Anonymous hatred had found its way onto his land. The social pressure had been building for weeks, subtle at first, then increasingly blatant. His business partners started questioning his judgment in oblique ways during meetings. The church ladies made sure Margaret saw their pointed avoidance every Sunday. Other ranchers casually mentioned they might need to reconsider partnerships for spring cattle drives. At the bank, Mr. Crawford was even less subtle. Robert, I'm speaking as a friend. This situation with that woman is affecting how people see you. It might affect how the bank sees your loan renewals come spring. The economic threat landed like a physical blow. Robert had built his operation on credit and reputation in equal measure. Lose one, lose everything. He found Margaret in the stables that evening, working late as always. She looked up from the breeding charts, saw his face, and knew immediately something had broken. What happened? He handed her the note, watched her read it, watched color drain from her face, watched her carefully rebuild her walls. I should go, she said. No. Robert, I won't cost you everything. You have a son to think about, a business, a future in this town. And what kind of future am I building if I cave to anonymous threats? A practical one, a safe one, a cowardly one. Margaret shook her head. There's no shame in choosing your child over a principle. I'm not worth losing your ranch. That's not your decision to make. But doubt had crept in. That night, alone in the main house, Robert stared at his wife's portrait. She'd been brave and strong and unflinching in her convictions. She'd loved him for standing by his mother against town judgment. What would she say now when the stakes included their son's future? His education, his place in this community? The answer came quiet but certain. She'd say do what's right, not what's easy. But knowing the answer didn't make the choice simpler. By morning, Margaret had packed her few belongings. She moved quietly, trying not to wake anyone, trying to leave before good sense could be overwhelmed by selfish hope. Thomas found her in her cabin, bag by the door. You're leaving! Margaret couldn't meet his eyes. It's better this way. Better for who? His voice cracked. You're the best person I know. You teach me things. You're nice to the horses. You make Papa smile. Your father has to think about his business. About you. About doing what's right. Thomas said with the clear moral certainty of childhood, if you leave because of mean people, aren't we just like them? Letting them win. The boy's words hit like stones in still water. Ripples spreading outward, Thomas ran from the cabin. Margaret heard him calling for his father, voice high with distress. She closed her eyes, pack heavy in her hand. Choice still unmade. Robert found his son in the stables, tears streaming down his face. She's leaving. Papa. Because people are mean. We have to stop her. Thomas. It's complicated. No, it's not. It's simple. Either we stand up for what's right or we don't. The words echoed his own teachings back at him. Robert pulled his son close, breathing in the smell of hay and horse and his boy's honest grief. The bank manager's warning weighed on him. The threatening note burned in his pocket. He could lose the ranch, his standing, his son's future in this town. The cost was real and terrifying. But the cost of surrender was his son's respect, his own integrity. The lesson that courage meant something only when it was convenient. Evening fell cold and clear. Robert watched Margaret from the house. Saw her teaching Thomas how to gentle a nervous filly. The girl horse had been skittish for weeks, spooked by quick movements and loud voices. Margaret worked with infinite patience, one step at a time, speaking low and steady, showing the filly she could be trusted. Pignon naissant. The horse gradually relaxed, finally nuzzling against Margaret's shoulder. Inaltabiskido and nai. Thomas mimicked her movements. Learning trust was earned through consistency. not demanded through force. Robert's throat tightened. This was what his son needed to learn. That competence had nothing to do with convention. That dignity mattered more than appearance. That courage meant standing firm when it cost you something, not when it was easy. He walked out to the paddock. Thomas looked up hopefully. Margaret kept her attention on the filly, not trusting herself to hope. There's a town meeting tomorrow night, Robert said. About spring planning and community concerns. Margaret nodded. Understanding. They'd make her the main concern. Drive her out with social pressure, since legal methods had failed. I'm going to speak. Robert continued. Robert, don't, they'll tear you apart. Maybe. But my son needs to see his father stand for what's right. Whatever it costs. He looked at Thomas, then back to Margaret. And I need to live with myself. You don't owe me this. No, he agreed. I owe it to him, to myself, to any person who's ever been judged for refusing to apologize for their abilities. Margaret's eyes filled. She blinked hard, refusing to let the tears fall. They'll destroy you. They'll try. Robert's smile was grim. But I've got truth on my side. And sometimes that's enough. Thomas grabbed his father's hand. I'll come too. No, son. You'll stay here with Margaret. Keep her from running. I won't run, Margaret said softly. Arr! A promise. She met his gaze, saw the determination there, felt something shift in her chest. I promise. That night. Robert prepared. Not speeches or rehearsed lines, but the simple organization of truth. Margaret's accomplishments, her character, her competence, the transformation of his breeding program under her management. Indentured. He thought about his mother, his late wife, all the strong women who'd been punished for their strength. Thought about his son, learning that courage was a choice made daily, not a disposition inherited. Tomorrow he'd stand before the town. Win or lose, his son would know his father tried. The morning dawned cold and bright, unforgiving in its clarity. The town hall filled early. People came with opinions already formed, hungry for spectacle. Robert arrived alone, leaving Thomas and Margaret at the ranch despite their protests. This is mine to do, he'd said. The meeting started with mundane business spring planting schedules, water rights discussions, fence line maintenance. Everyone waited impatiently for the real agenda. Finally, Mayor Peterson cleared his throat. There's been some community concern about certain situations affecting our town's moral character. The room shifted. Everyone knew what came next. Robert stood before anyone could name Margaret directly. I'd like to address the gossip about Margaret Hayes. Silence fell, hungry and anticipatory. She manages my breeding program, Robert said, voice carrying to the back rows. Better than anyone I've ever employed. She's organized 5 years of scattered records into coherent breeding plans. She's handled horses other men couldn't manage. She's honest, hardworking, and treats every living creature with respect and dignity. That's not the concern. Mrs. Henderson interrupted. It's her manner, her clothing, what she represents. She represents competence. Robert said, she wears practical clothing for dangerous work. Would you prefer she risk her life in skirts to maintain your sense of propriety? There are standards. Someone called out. Expectations for decent women. and she exceeds every standard that actually matters. Character, capability, integrity. The only standards she violates are arbitrary rules designed to limit what women can do or be. I cry. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some angry, some thoughtful. Mr. Crawford stood. Hey, Chief. What about your son? What lessons is he learning from this situation? This was the moment. Robert met the banker's eyes steadily. My son is learning that people deserve judgment based on their actions and character, not their appearance or others' prejudices. He's learning that courage means defending dignity, especially when someone is vulnerable. He's learning that practical wisdom matters more than social convention. Robert's voice strengthened. If that's corruption, I pray he stays corrupted his entire life. The silence that followed felt different. Uncertain rather than hostile, a rancher Robert barely knew stood in the back. My daughter wants to learn horses. I've been telling her it's not proper work for a woman. But she's got your son's same spark, same questions about why not. Mrs. Peterson, the mayor's wife, cleared her throat. I was once judged harshly for being too educated, for having opinions, for not being quiet enough. She looked at her husband. Robert's mother stood by me then, spoke up when others whispered. One by one, voices joined. Not everyone, not even most, but enough. People remembering their own encounters with judgment, recognizing themselves in the story being told. This town is better than anonymous threats, Robert said. We're better than destroying someone for refusing to apologize for their competence. Margaret Hayes has harmed no one. She's earned her place through honest work. If you can't respect that, then I question what we're actually protecting here. He sat down. The room erupted in argument. Some defending him, others condemning. Mayor Peterson called for order, but the debate continued. Robert didn't stay for the vote on nothing in particular. He'd said his piece, done what he came to do, win or lose. His son would know he tried, walking home under cold stars. Thomas met him at the gate. The boy ran to his father, wrapped arms tight around his waist. Did you do it? Did you stand up for her? I did. Did they listen? Some did. That's more than nothing. Margaret stood in the barn doorway, backlit by lamplight. Robert saw the question in her eyes. He smiled, tired but certain. It's done, he said. She nodded, trust and something deeper passing between them in the darkness. Spring came early that year, melting winter's grip with gentle insistence. The town didn't transform overnight. Change never worked that way. But small shifts accumulated into something real. Some people still crossed the street to avoid Margaret. Others nodded greeting with cautious respect. A few women asked genuine questions about horse management, daughters in tow with eager eyes. Robert's business relationships stabilized. Not everyone agreed with his stand, but they respected consistency. A man who lived his principles was worth knowing, even in disagreement. 6 weeks after the town meeting, on a morning when frost finally released its hold, Robert found Margaret on her usual porch, coffee steaming, watching sunrise paint the land gold. He sat beside her without asking permission. They'd moved past that kind of formality. I've been thinking. Robert said, dangerous habit. He smiled. I'm not good at pretty words. Never have been. But I need to say something. And I need you to know I mean it. Margaret's heart quickened. She kept her eyes on the horizon, afraid to look at him. I'm not asking because it's proper. Robert continued. or because the town expects anything. I'm asking because I respect who you are. Your strength, your competence, your refusal to apologize for being exactly yourself. He paused. I'd be honored if you'd consider building a life with me. With us. Margaret turned to him then, saw the hope and fear mixed in his expression. As a partner, she said carefully. Not as someone being rescued. As an equal. Someone who makes this ranch better. Someone who makes me better. Someone my son already loves like family. I don't fit what people expect. You fit what matters. Robert reached for her hand, palm callous like hers, shaped by the same honest work. I'm not offering rescue. I'm offering partnership. If you want it. Margaret let herself feel the hope she'd been guarding against. Let herself imagine permanence, belonging, home. Yes. She said simply. The wedding happened on a Tuesday morning. Simple and small. Judge Morrison performed the ceremony in his office. Thomas stood witness, grinning so wide his face might split. Margaret wore a simple dress she'd chosen herself, but her work pants hung visible in the wardrobe they now shared. Some townspeople attended the celebration after. Others didn't. Neither Robert nor Margaret particularly cared. They'd built something real, on foundation of mutual respect. And that mattered more than universal approval. At the ranch that evening, a new foal took its first wobbling steps. Thomas watched with Margaret, both of them murmuring encouragement. Robert joined them, arms settling around his wife's shoulders with comfortable certainty. Can I teach my friends about horses? Thomas asked. James and Sarah asked if they could learn. Margaret smiled. Anyone who wants to learn is welcome. Even girls? Thomas asked innocently. And especially girls. If they're interested. The boy ran off to spread word, leaving Robert and Margaret in the gentle quiet of evening. The ranch gate stood open, welcoming anyone who approached with honest intent. No regrets? Robert asked. Margaret leaned into him, breathing in hay and horse and home. Not a single one. In the paddock, the new foal nursed beside its mother. New life, new family, new beginnings built on old wisdom. That character mattered more than convention. That courage meant standing firm when it cost something. That dignity once defended could transform everything. The sun set gold over Harrison Ranch. Inside the house, lamplight glowed warm. Margaret's work pants hung beside Robert's Sunday suit, practical and proper, existing in easy harmony. The town would continue talking. Some would come around. Others wouldn't. But here, within these gates, 3 people had found what mattered: family chosen through respect, partnership earned through integrity, and home built not on others' approval, but on their own unshakable foundation. Tomorrow they'd wake to work and challenges and the endless demands of the frontier. But tonight, they stood together watching stars emerge, belonging finally to something real and lasting. The gates stayed open. The future stretched wide, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Margaret looked ahead without fear. Just hope, gentle and certain as spring.